Perfect. All right, perfect. Thank you for bearing with the technical issues. And like I said, we'll take this recording. I'll email all the people that have registered, apologize, and let them know that they can access the resources. But in the meantime, I'm just going to turn it right over to you. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks to all the folks from Sasank for inviting me out here. So I'm going to start this just kind of walking you through a couple key pieces, do some introductions. I also have a slide deck, so I'll probably be sticking a lot to my PowerPoint, but I'm going to go in and out a bit and also walk you through some of our web pages as well. So just bear with me as I share my screen here. I'll do it all so that way that I can get right to the PowerPoint for you. Without further ado, so again, thanks so much for having me today. It should just be loading. Hopefully you can see the screen okay. Great. And if you have any questions throughout, I asked Jen to watch the chat, but I'll be going in and out a bit, but I just might not be able to see your questions. So feel free to interrupt me at any time if there's something that comes to mind or something you're curious about. We have lots of time at the end as well. So again, my name is Adam Young. I'm an education evaluation specialist at the Bank of Canada Museum, Musée de la Banque de Canada. And today I'm going to be walking you through kind of our one key big solid resource that we are launching in the coming months. Half of it's already up on our website, but then by the end of the summer, we'll have 6 brand new lesson plans that really touch on economy, from personal economics to Canadian economics, or national economics to international or global economies. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the First Nations, Inuit and Métis, in respective territories, as well as my own at the unceded Algonquin territory of the Anishinaabe people. We pay our respects to Indigenous peoples across the country and to the ancestors for their immeasurable contributions to this country. Today, without further ado, so I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the Bank of Canada Museum, the Bank of Canada, what we do. I'll provide a kind of a thorough outline of this resource that we've been creating and crafting together. And then I'll take some time to go over 3 kind of more interactive activities for you. Hopefully we can have some folks chime in or try out a few pieces online. You won't need anything aside from maybe a piece of paper and a pen for a few activities, just to jot down some notes. And then I'll let you know what's to come for the upcoming next 3 lessons. So the Bank of Canada Museum, I'm not sure if you've been before, but we're actually right downtown Ottawa, just off Spark Street. This beautiful kind of almost looks like a transit station stop. A lot of local folks get confused for. Is actually opening to the museum, and we're right across here on Wellington, close to Supreme Court, and the Parliament's just down the road. Behind us here is the Bank of Canada, so it's kind of centered around the original bank building built in the 30s when the central bank was founded, and around these glass towers. So the Bank of Canada Museum is...
Sorry, oh, yeah, I'm just going to interrupt you here. What I'm seeing, I'm thinking everybody else is, I'm just seeing a blank screen. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh no. Okay. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me fix that for you.
Yeah, because you were describing like, I was just thinking.
Yeah, it's blank for me too.
Yep.
Why don't we try this?
Technology
is that working for you?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Perfect. Yeah. Sorry about that. I chose the wrong screen. So this is the Bank of Canada Museum here. So just to give you a bit of an outline, so this is the main museum here. It was built initially, it housed the national currency collection. So if you've been to Ottawa a while back, before 2017, you may have went into the center block where it really focused on money and currency and historical examples of currency and money in Canada. It was reimagined 2017 and reopened for the sesquicentennial, the 150th. It's super interactive. So it's free to the public. We have free school programs as well. And we really try to demystify the bank's functions in the Canadian economy, but also house the national currency collection and celebrate all these interesting artifacts that show our story to the economy, but also globally. Up to the right here is an example of our giant digital wall that shows some different artifacts. We have over 100,000 in the collection. And then to the bottom right here is our brand new temporary exhibition. So this is actually traveling across the country as of December. It's off to Alberta at a few different spots. I don't recall exactly where. But it has 10 different questions that were commonly asked by kids about money that they sent to us, and we built a beautiful exhibition on it. So I'm going to try clicking through here and hope I get to the right spot. Oops, 1 second here. There we go. We also, on the bottom right here, we have these avatars. So it's quite a digital experience. So you create an avatar, your own little guy or girl that follows around for you as you're going through and exploring the different interactives. So Canada's only economics and money museum, as I mentioned, completely renovated and renewed. We have virtual school program that's all about money for grades K to 5. And then we have on-site school programs for the older years that we offer, one on trade, intergalactic trade or trade simulations. And the other one is about inflation and budgeting. So the online resource side is what I'm going to be focusing on today. So we have a bunch of great lesson plans, videos, games, and activities. Of course, we look at the history of trade and money and trade in Canada, including pre-Confederation, Fur Trade era, and onwards into the future and the future of digital money. Symbolism and portraits and who gets chosen on the banknotes and why over history. Different really key pieces on saving and spending, forming budgets, financial literacy, and money math for the elementary years. And as well, of course, the bank's main role, which is the interest rate, so targeting inflation at 2%. We have a bunch of resources that go on or Econ 101, but also a sense of why the bank does its forecasting and how we do that forecasting, and other different contemporary research topics that the bank's economists do. So for the rest of today, I'm going to really focus on a few different pieces. I'm just going to adjust my screen a little bit. This is a web-based educational resource. So it explores the Bank of Canada through looking at key Canadian economic concepts. Within each lesson, we've integrated some pieces that touch back to why this kind of information or data that the students are looking at matters for the central bank. Our target audience is mostly grades 7 to 12. And you'll see within the lessons that some of them might work stronger or less strong, depending on your grade level and what subject you're teaching. There's a lot of really great connections to social studies. So that's, of course, why we're here. Econ grade 11, 12, there's some more pieces that are centered towards that. And there's some that are more in geography and also personal economics, health, and well-being. And it's an a la carte resource. So within each of the lessons that I'll be walking you through today, there's some pieces that might interest you more than others. Of course, we encourage people, if they want, to go through all 6 lesson plans once they're fully launched. But if not, there's different infographics, data visualization tools, small quizzes, and work partner station work that can be done. So you can really treat it as taking as much or as little as you need. Our student outcomes. So within this, we really focused on recognizing that economics is around us and helping students really understand that these key economy concepts like trade-offs and supply and demand, of course. We also want students to develop economic skills, so thinking critically, assessing risk, drawing conclusions from data and information to make the best choice. We try and really demystify economics, which I'll show you in our first lesson in a little bit here, getting kids to think like an economist as to how do we look at a problem that might have many solutions and collect different data and think of things differently. Connecting the role and functions of the Bank of Canada to the wider society. So we have 5 core functions beyond targeting inflation at 2%. We produce and distribute Canada's banknotes. We also look at financial system supervision to make sure that the financial system in Canada is moving and functioning at a good pace. Retail payments supervision, so looking at things such as PayPal and the like to make sure that these are regulated in Canada. These all kind of form part of the Bank of Canada's functions. We also want the students to be able to say, for example, if they're reading a newspaper, could they develop a sense of trends, looking at news articles and kind of understanding a little bit more about economics in general, starts and stops of different things, when the economy is doing well, when it's not doing so well, and kind of trying to understand why that might be. And finally, appraising their current and their future roles in the economy. This is really geared towards these high school and teenage level. We want to really situate them in a place where they are almost adults doing their own thing and having their own freedom with finances and being able to choose things around investments or choices they're going to make. But those decision-making pieces are already happening with them right now. When they're going out and deciding what kind of pair of shoes they want to buy, or they're going to buy a pair of shoes or save money for post-secondary school, these are all financial decisions the students are making, and we try and tie back into those real-world situations to students as much as we can. We also have some adaptations you're going to see in the lessons. So lessons are all web pages, and we have all the connections after. You'll see our OWL, or differentiation OWL, and the focus of the OWL is really to acknowledge that sometimes might want more of a challenge for some activities, or you might want to simplify them a little bit based on your student's age and ability and level and what you're focusing on. We also really focused on a bit of like an EDIJ lens, so equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice in terms of who we feature and how we feature and the stories we tell of folks. Also recognize that we have diverse curriculum across the country that we're trying to find ways to integrate economics in. So again, it will work better in some places and some subjects than other provinces. And the connection to the Bank of Canada is there as a side piece at times, but also really there to focus going back to help see the big picture. We'll link as well at the bottom of each of these to great external supports from our partners or from others around our website, or other kind of taking it further extension activities that you might want to do. And of course, whenever it comes to data and the economy, as I say, if we would have done this in 2019, early 2020, it'd be a very different story. We really are trying to keep things evergreen. So as much as the world changes, we try and put timestamps and timestamps or different areas of time in all of our resources so that even 5, 10 years from now, it's still relevant for students today. So you can follow along with any of this. I put this little icon here because every now and then I can go back and forth and toggle to the website, but I'll probably keep most of the PowerPoint. But all of our resources are on bankofcanadamuseum.ca/learn. You can filter by grade, topic level, subject, and type. And as I go through some of these, again, the first 3 resources we're looking at, they're completely online. So you can take a look more at the big ideas. The student outcomes and objectives are all at the beginning of them, and a bit of a walkthrough as to how the lesson will work. So lesson by lesson, we're going to get into a few of these here. We start first of all with thinking like an economist, looking at everyday examples of economy and decision making around you. Then we went to building budgets. So this looks at different budgeting categories, getting students to think more about how they might budget for their future, and also role playing or taking on another portfolio of a household or single person, or whatever it might be, a student, a senior, giving them a bit of an outline of their budget and trying to find balance within that budget and giving them some budgeting advice. We move then into Canadian economics. So the bottom left here, I guess the very bottom here, connecting Canadian industries. This is a really fun, engaging piece where we sampled, I think, 8 different types of industries in Canada, some big, some small, and getting students to better understand the difference between primary and secondary resources and service industry, and also getting them to better understand all the variety of industries and economies that make up Canada. Next, we do an agreed deep data dive in lesson 4, which is decoding Canadian economic data. So this is interpreting current and historical economic data. And then the final 2 take it global. So we look at illustrating Canada's place in the world using this great museum interactive that we've now put online as well, that looks over the history of trade, foreign direct investment, immigration, and foreign direct investment, immigration, and GDP, so gross domestic product, where we have comparative ways that students can compare a place of Canada to the rest of the world, and imports and exports, immigration trends, etc. Then finally, we do a piece on investing. So investing in a better world will be a role play with investment factors and scenarios for students to think about. With this as well, they'll kind of be having to prioritize what different factors or things are most important for them if they were thinking of investing, and then give them some scenarios of different cards that there's a catch that none of them are perfect companies, but who would they choose to maybe invest in based on the factors or characteristics they're given. I'm going to get started right here into lesson 1. So there's a lot of things I want to go through, but I kind of want to give you a bit of a taste of each of the lessons and get you a bit engaged. The first set of 2 lessons are thinking like an economist and building budgets. These are personal, kind of our Econ 101. And the first activity, we start by watching a video featuring economists explaining how they make decisions. Then we identify important economic concepts in a series of short comics. After that kind of inquiry-led questioning about what's happening in each comic, the students will work in smaller groups to maybe focus on one comic that has a series of definitions or economic concepts hidden within it. And then we close off with watching a video that connects this decision-making to the larger role of the bank in forecasting and how the Canadian economy is based off of all these individual actions, but also corporate and business actions that come together to make up the wider economy. And we close with an online quiz to review these concepts. So I'm going to see if this will work, but I might have to just adjust here for a second and make sure that I'm sharing my audio. So just give me a second here, because I always mess this up. Background noise. I don't know, Jen, if you recall. I have to press a button somewhere, but I always forget where it is.
Change to share the volume.
Yeah, exactly. To share the internal. Oh, it might be right here, actually. Oh. If not, I'll just. Oh, that's right. Oh, it actually might be there. Leave computer audio. Nope. Audio settings. Let me try audio settings for a second.
Sure. Considering our technical issues, we'll all have some patience.
No problem. Video? Nope. I don't quite see it. I'm used to it being simpler, but that might just be my
Yeah.
problem. What I'll do is I'll share with you a bit and I'll just put on the subtitles for now. And I think you'll still get a pretty good preview and I might actually be able to turn it on somehow while you're doing that.
Okay.
So this is our first example.
If you want to think like an economist, one important thing is to ask a lot of questions and ask about why things are happening and what impacts they might have for different players in the economy.
Question what's driving prices, what's driving economic growth, what's behind hiring.
Be curious about what is the truth and how can I understand what is happening by leveraging as many resources as possible, going in the news, reading a book, listening to an expert in the field. So just be curious about what's happening and trying to understand why is it that is happening.
That's really the job of an economist, is to dissect and look beyond prices and quantities to try to come up with a story of what's driving up prices, what's behind the labor market. It's not just numbers and math.
So this video is 4 minutes long, and I should mention it again, of course, being a government agency of sorts, a crown corp, if you will. Everything's in English and French. So the French actually has a bit of a different take, and this was actually created using 3 different economists, English and 3 different French, from the bank that kind of are outlining a bit about what's going on and how they make sense of the economy and the research they do. We also move in later into looking at economics can be fun, of course, and we provide 2 examples in each video. So for the English, we talk a little bit about opportunity cost. Is it better that you decide to study for your test the next day and do your homework, or play video games? And the opportunity cost idea of what's the cost, the next best option you have in front of you. And the other one that we go into here is supply and demand. So we talk a little bit about how things such as this pseudo Pokemon card, once there's higher demand, usually the cost gets higher. So we talk a little bit about how that works. And if there's less of it, of course, it gets even more expensive. We also talk a little about global economics to close off. And again, we really focus on it's not just boring math and numbers. Economics is really all around us. So the kids start with that as an intro, and then we move into these sets of comics. So I'd like you to think a little bit about looking at this comic and try and answer for me. Can you identify any economic concepts that are going on in this comic? And I have access to the chat, so I'll actually be able to see it. I was able to meander both screens together here.
Are you okay if we just talk since we're a smaller group, do you think?
Yeah, of course, Jen, no problem.
So, I think that's one of the key things we teach kids in economics is just that it's all about making choices.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
And by
Anybody
the way,
else?
we're able to hear the video. So the video works.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Magic. I love that. Okay. Thanks for letting me know, Jen.
Oh, sorry, the choice is so important, but also it's very visual that you can actually see and start to make some determination of cost, your even the use of time in this case as well. So not just the cost that it may take, but your use of time.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelley. So yeah, within each of these, and we encourage you with the class to stop and think about each of them. We provide the definitions after, but we have some questions about what do you think's happening here? If you're not really if this is kind of your first foray into economics, which sometimes it might be used for, what's going on? The values is a great question. So what do you value? If it's an opportunity cost, it's your 2 greatest choices. So the choice here is to go to the movie theater or to watch a movie at home. Ultimately, maybe the movie sucked, it wasn't that great, and you're always thinking about the other choice. And of course, the other reality is the sunk cost. So you can't go to the film and then say, I didn't really like this film, can I get my money back? And the other sunk cost is your time. So even though we may be working with students that aren't necessarily doing a lot of financial transactions every day, we're trying to give them more decision-making pieces within this. Our next one here, if you want to take a second here, maybe talk through what you're seeing or what you think might be going on. Awesome.
Maybe starting to look at the value. Yeah, the value. Sorry, I just noticed.
So supply and demand for sure. Supply and demand and opportunity costs and trade-offs you're going to see often throughout these because every comic has a bit of decision-making piece. The other thing we talk about a lot is utility. So we think about marginal utility in this case. So imagine you're at the supermarket and you're buying there's one set of chips that make you pretty happy, you're quite hungry and you really love them. There's another set, but maybe they're double the price and they just make you a little bit more happy and they're more expensive. Sometimes actually marginal utility is there's not actually double the amount of pleasure or happiness you get from it. So going with the other option works well. Competition as well, we kind of sneak in because we have two competing brands. And the rest of these go into, so we start from kind of very simple ones that look at trade and money and currency and debt and loans. And then we get into more complicated ones like this one, which is trade-offs, externalities, and subsidies. So subsidies, for example, of encouraging seniors to take the bus by keeping the cost free. But also a trade-off is as much as you might love driving because you can listen to your own music and have your cup of coffee. If you have traffic or a congested toll road, that might not work so well. And externalities, we think a little bit about those things in society that aren't actually costed or attributed for. The big one that we usually talk about is air pollution. Air pollution affects everybody, but usually there's not a price on it. And that's the trade-off of having a factory is an externality is something that comes out that actually impacts everybody. So I really like these comics, and what we did after as a follow-up is your kids can go into stations or you can choose to focus on just a few depending on what you're teaching. You have a key concepts and extended concept definitions and handouts for you. You've also got a series of questions. We made the questions where some of them are more about your own personal decisions, other ones are more societal. So think of examples of sunk costs for each of these different things and what might happen, and then pros and cons based on the decision you're making today. You have answers and answer keys for all these too, in case some of the concepts get a little bit too complicated or you're not quite sure on the answer. And the comics go on. So we actually have 6 different ones looking at good debt, bad debt, and depreciation. The bottom, we have competition and markets and also making those financial decisions. The top right, we threw in exports and imports based on different, the flags here to show that there's different purchases going on. But the main key one here is inflation and seeing that the value of your goods over time, it might cost more to get a smaller amount of goods. The bottom right, we're looking at loans and debts and also a bit of advertising and how advertising and incentives, such as maybe a free headphones for getting a cell phone, might shift your opinion. We tried to make it so some are more obvious and some are a little bit more hidden. So there's a challenge there if you need it, but there's also a simplicity if you need it as well. And it goes through a number of different ideas, and all these terms are defined within the handouts. I'm going to move to the next one, which is building budgets. So this has been a super popular resource for us right now, especially I know in Alberta with the new financial literacy curriculum, but also across the country. There's not a lot of budget pieces that work so well, or it can be hard to find. Now with this one, we actually, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit about it, we actually removed the numbers with it and kept it to percentages. So we get students to first think about brainstorming expense categories, expenses that they pay for, but also thinking about their parent or guardian at their home. Then we give them an imaginary household, and they have to try and provide some advice for the budgets for these people. My screen just went blank, but hopefully it's okay on your end. And then from there, move into connecting the budgeting advice with tips for members' own spending. So this is the household. And then conclusion is discussed as a class how individual spending connects to larger financial system. Are you still seeing this okay? Or should it cut off?
So Adam, we just lost your screen just now. When you're looking at your desktop, which just makes me exhausted looking at
that also makes me exhausted. I think I just had a bit of trouble with the HDMI cord. So let me put it back here. Sorry about that.
My HDMI cord stopped working today. So I think it's all me. I obviously have a demon that is coming after. Okay, we've got you back again.
No problem. Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Sorry about that. This is great. So these are the different profiles. So we give students the option of 2 parents, 2 kids, an intergenerational family, a couple with pets, a single dad and his daughter, a university student or a senior. In each of these situations, we give them a profile, and then afterwards they have a budgeting worksheet to fill out. This one this is my older version, so it's much more accessible with black font, so don't be worried about that. We asked them first to think about what expenses are noteworthy of the profiles. This is a spot for them to take notes as they read through a small profile that outlines their expenses, and then create a balanced budget totaling 100%. And then at the bottom, thinking about what budgeting advice would you give? So what happens is every student is given, you can either do this in pairs or small groups or one at a time, a bit of information on the people, but not everything. We actually only give them one percentage number to build off the rest of their budget, which is their housing. So the housing will always be given a number. In this case, 35% of the income goes to housing. We also let them know if that includes utilities. The rest of it is a bit of a guess for the students, but we did that for a couple of reasons. First of all, we wanted to start getting them thinking more about these people and inferring a little bit about what their expenses might be based on the text that's in front of them, just like often a financial advisor would actually do, depending on how much they know of your own situation. And there's enough clues into how they're living their lifestyle and what they spend on to then be able to try and balance their budget and provide advice on how much percentage of each thing they might want to spend on. So I'm going to give you a second here, maybe 2 minutes here, to read over the Smith-Jones example. And then I want you either in the chat, Jen, if you can read it, because I lost my chat option now, or if you just want to speak aloud and tell me kind of something you noticed that you might do that you're kind of worried about with their budget.
Sounds good. I'll keep a look.
Thanks. So having a first glance, I'm sorry to give you too much time on this, but is there anything you noticed that you think is kind of something that's super important for them that you'd have to maybe allocate a high amount of percentage for their budget, or something that you think you might want to shift or provide advice for them to maybe help cut down their costs?
Is this kind of one of the goals that they have is to try and reduce their costs, or?
Yeah, some of them need a bit more support than others. This one I find they're probably pretty close to balance as they are. We do have a few though where when they're a larger family and they have quite an expensive house with lots of mortgage payments or a lot of dependents, and you start to look at the lifestyle, there might be suggestions you might want to make.
Yeah, because I do. Stephen in the chat has said, they've got a high debt to disposable income ratio, possibly. And that's what I thought. I'm like, she's making small payments on her student loan. I'm like, girl, pay that thing off. And then also leasing a car. Do you need two vehicles? Can you take public transport? That sort of a thing.
Awesome. So yeah, these are exactly what people often tell us. So you're picking up on it. So of course, some students, they might find it still a little bit difficult. So what we have in the answer key is kind of a range of percentages that we suggest. And if you find your students are struggling because they need a bit more clues or number clues to help get the 100%, you can always provide a few more numbers. Say you give them 10% for utilities to work with, maybe a couple other categories. But within each of them, there's always different pieces, right? Just like the comic strips, where some of the pieces might look good for one student, but for another student, they might provide other suggestions based on also what you know about finances and understanding around money. And we kind of kept this in as an option where if you wanted to focus, say, only on the university student example, you could, or you could give them a wide variety. So the single dad is also a realtor, but he's flipping a house, hoping to make a profit, which has a whole other thing going on. The senior citizen is actually doing pretty well, but there's a risk of, as he gets older, still being able to live within his means. The intergenerational family, there's a lot of independents that don't necessarily aren't providing any money back to the family. And then the 2 parents, 2 kids live in the city, which works out well, but the salaries may not actually align perfectly for their own expenses. So there's always some improvements to be made, but even just getting the students to walk through and think a little bit about these characters Helps develop empathy, of course, but also kind of some critical thinking in terms of budgeting. We close that off by, I think, going back and saying, okay, what are some key points and advice you made at the bottom of that worksheet? Now let's get into see if they actually match with this budgeting tips for teens. So this is created based on a lot of different insight and modern financial planners. We took a lot of the information from budgeting books today and put it together in a beautiful infographic with some tips along the way of some different pieces. So this becomes a great discussion point with students, and we have it. We could print it if you want, maybe by 11/17, or put it up on your Blackboard or Smartboard. And at the end of it, we help them connect back to the wider economy, as we try and do in every lesson. For every dollar you spend, someone else can earn. So money is actually always moving through the economy in many interconnected ways. We give them some examples here that are actually also exactly based off of the characters they just saw. Our next two lessons are on the Canadian economy, so we call it On Target, with a hint or a play with the 2% target that we have at the bank. The first one is Connecting Canadian Industries, and the second one, which is just going through translation now, so I can't show you all the worksheets, but it'll be up in a bit here, is Decoding Canadian Economic Data. But today I'll close off today after doing some industry activity. I'll close off by showing you some of the outlines of some of the graphs and charts and explain how that one will work. So this Connecting Canadian Industries is, first we review what they already know about the Canadian economy, and it really focuses on these hexagons or these manipulatives. So before we get there, we start by getting to learn more about a specific industry in Canada, and they answer some follow-up questions. Then after, we get them to do a jigsaw activity to make connections across these industries that are given, but also they want to add more different industries than the hexagons to connect them all together. We close towards the end of that with a quiz that discovers your place in the Canadian economy and connecting employment fields to industries in your region or province or territory, and then discussing what you've learned. So these 8 industries, we chose not necessarily at random, but we tried to get a good view from across the country. Some very old and well-established industries in Canada, some less established, but always connect back to some key economic definitions or concepts. So looking at these 8, I have a challenge for you. So what I'll probably do is I'm going to switch to the challenge question, and then I'll switch back to these tiles, so then at least you have a sense of how you want to order them. So my first question is, I'd like you to try and sort these industry hexagons, given what you already might know or your assumptions you have about these industries, to your total GDP contribution. So gross domestic product means that total value that it comes back to the economy. And then we're thinking from largest to smallest. So I'll give you 2 minutes to think about which ones would be largest to the smallest, and then we're going to reveal some answers for you.
Sorry, is this Canada-wide or Alberta only?
This is Canada-wide. Great
Thanks.
question. No problem. Give you another 20 seconds or so.
And I think being from Alberta, I'm probably going to show an Alberta bias in my.
I'm guessing you didn't put oyster farming as the top one then.
I absolutely did not put oyster farming at the top.
Does somebody want to take a try at this, and I'll reveal the answers as you list off your list for me, or you read off your list for me?
All right, so Stephen, if you can't see it, put vehicles first, then lumber, then oil and gas, then small store, then tourism, then film and video.
Okay. Good try. I think some of your end ones were closer, but your top one is oil and gas, rightly so. Then we move to small store, retail trade, lumber production, vehicle and parts, tourism, film and video, maple syrup, and then oyster farming. So we have the data and the stats to source back in case you're curious on these. But I always find, especially with teachers, everyone's kind of always shocked that the places are where they are. We could do the same thing by total number of employees. Maybe we'll give you a minute and you can try that as well. So total number of employees in Canada, largest to smallest, directly in these fields. I'll go back to this here for you. Another 15 seconds.
And then just as people are finishing off, Jackie put in, I got the top and the bottom. Same Jackie. I was able to get oil and gas at the top and the oysters at the bottom. Sorry, girl. She's in the East Coast there. So
I know. I
Okay.
was like, where are the other fisheries? I have a feeling the oyster farming is also the lowest amount of employees for this. If I was to make a guess.
Does somebody want to share their answers and we'll see how you did? Let's move to that slide. Largest to smallest. Who's going?
I can try.
Tourism, is tourism first or is it retail? Like
Retail's first. Yeah.
Ah, good for you.
All right. Second.
tourism?
Nice. All right. Keep going.
I said oil and gas.
Film and video.
Fine, look at that.
oh wow. That is surprising.
Oil and gas is after. What's the next on your list?
Vehicle.
Yeah. Great job.
Lumber.
Perfect.
Maple syrup?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And close
oyster.
off with oyster farming.
Ah, good job, you guys.
So we specifically chose different parts of the economy based on concepts, but also getting a bit of a sense of what happens across the country. I don't have the employment numbers in front of me, but everyone's always shocked to see small store retail trade. When you think about it, how much we do shop in small stores, and in particular, it's in the millions. Tourism is actually pretty high. Tourism is a bit tougher for them to get specifically, but the number is super high. When you think of things like oil and gas and vehicle and parts manufacturing, there's a lot more automation in those fields. So there are certainly less workers, but there's still a lot of development of getting the oil and gas extraction correctly, or in the case of vehicle and parts, all the different moving parts to make that happen. Within this, at the very beginning as well, we get the students, we introduce the idea of primary, secondary, and service resources and get them to sort the categories by that. Another extension activity is which ones do you think are most important for your community? There's all sorts of ways you can sort it. Which ones are could be most impacted by climate change. So with having these manipulative hexagons, which you can print or you can use a PowerPoint and adjust and move as you want, just to help develop some conversations. Later on after, they're doing connecting industries. So maybe they have a way that they can put all 8 in some sort of network or web to show the connections between them, putting some text or pieces in it. And the other piece before we get into that I forgot to mention is we outlined a couple of key concepts, such as which industry. So if we give each student one industry to look at, is which industries are do you think your industry is most impacted by foreign exchange rates? So a couple of students will raise their hand, and then we have suggestions of which ones would be most impacted. And we go through that with a couple other different economic terms like specialization, et cetera. So it's kind of a fun activity. There's a lot going on there. And then towards the end of it, we also, I forgot to mention, have kind of a nice summary card. So in each of these, there's a summary card that looks at what's going on in that industry, why it's important to Canada, the future of that industry, and other kind of did you know factoids, all on one page. The last one I want to share with you today, because the other two are still in development, but I'll give you a little sneak peek on a few pieces, just like this guy, is decoding Canadian economic data. So this one is probably the most in-depth one that I've had the pleasure of writing and creating and drafting with a number of bank economists helping as well. This one, we're really looking about Bank of Canada and the data it analyzes, but also not just specifically Bank of Canada data that maybe people might think we analyze, but larger trends and graphs that outline the history of the Canadian economy and into today. It's really focusing on data literacy. And we start by giving them one example of a chart that you'll do together. We look at inflation over time, and you'll start to kind of grasp when the bank was founded, going through the Great Depression, getting the kids to try and spot recessions based on inflation rate changes. And then we get into the idea of inflation targeting since the early 90s and showing that that's significantly helped. Recognizing, of course, COVID is a different kettle of fish, of course, but just to give them a better sense of what's going on. After doing that example, one on inflation over time, we have 5 other graphs or charts that they can do in small group station work, and there's a 2-part to each one. The first part, I'm just going to cut through here. The text is wrong, but just to give you a sense of what happens is, for part 1, they're given an incomplete graph or chart. Every graph or chart has a nice little real economist that we are illustrated in a nice little headshot of. And they speak a little bit with a quick quote about why this kind of data matters to the bank or the society at large. The pre-work version has a number of different things for them to do to kind of get a sense of what's going on. Also, oftentimes things like what kind of title would you give this graph if it's blank? How, in this case, where would you categorize these different areas of CPI basket? And then you can compare over time. So they also have work that they're doing on the inflation rate formula by giving them CPI rates at different times and a base rate as well. So graph 1, after they try their luck at graph 1, we give them the answers in graph 2 and a series of additional questions. So they'll get the answers to what the questions they had, or the filling in the blanks, the labels, to see how they did. Every time they'll get an explainer. And again, this is just draft text, so don't take it seriously. The explainer walks over a bit more around what is going on in the graph or chart and why it's important. They have some more deeper analysis questions. They'll have a forecasting or future thinking around what data they're looking at, and then a broader societal question that'll connect more to lived experience of people or a greater society. So the series of graphs and charts are quite interesting, and they're very surprising data. So number 4 is the future of work. This is data that looked post-COVID, what's going to have the largest rate of change of different top categories that'll see future employment growth projected. And there's also another layer that ESDC has done with this, with what areas of work here or categories have a majority of female workers, and getting students to actually place in their guesses as to what that would be before. We have a cash use one because, of course, the bank distributes banknotes. So we need to get a sense of how much money to print to make sure that we can have it and use it every day as needed. So we get them to actually relabel. It's not here, cut it off on the side, but labeling how much people use cash percentage of their day-to-day transactions versus debit versus credit versus contactless tap and go. We also have one that looks at debt, and this is debt through different demographic ages, where we have the debt split out by different types of debt, whether it's student debt, a line of credit. This is all non-mortgage debt as well, before you're like shocked that everyone has such little debt. And then we have some questions that connect back to why mortgages aren't included and different types of debt across ages. This is the inflation over time graph that they have to start filling in and putting in the different places and trying to track where the recessions lie, and then highlighting this band to try and figure out, if they highlight an average here, to try and guess for themselves what the interest rate target is of the bank, which is between 1% and 3%. This final one here is wages and productivity. So this comes from an article the bank produced that we've had the pleasure of making into a graph now, looking at labor productivity, so the amount of money paid per hour, total compensation per hour, so how much people are paid in different industries. We give the students different pieces, such as a stagehand, a waiter, car manufacturing person, someone working in oil and gas utilities. And first of all, they have to try and guess which dot these each belong to, and then they're given the results. So this series of graphs and charts, it's pretty in-depth. Again, it's kind of a 2-parter where they have to complete some pieces in advance and then move onwards. But it's quite an interesting activity for them to really look at all sorts of different economic data and put themselves within it. Just to close off, because I'm talking too much. So our final 2 lessons are going to be Us in the World, where we look at visualizing Canada's place in the world using this data visualization tool. This is already up on our website, so if you want to compare data and look at it, you're more than welcome to. And then Investing in a Better World will have those different scenarios. So again, they're coming soon, but they're going to have a bunch of different quizzes using that interactive map. We'll use DeBono's thinking hats for some 3-step interview questions. And then for investing, we're going to brainstorm how you invest and then sort the factors most important for you in investing, and then choose an imaginary company between 3 choices that you'd like to invest in. So again, the lessons that I wasn't able to show you everything today are launching by the end of the summer. You can sneak peek and access the first 3 already online through our website. And we also can offer, if you're interested in your school or school district, a virtual workshop for teachers if you'd like to have a bit more of a walk through the different resources. And we have our newsletter, so it comes out quarterly, and we'll update you once these are released via our quarterly newsletter, so you can find that online as well. I think that's it for me. I'm curious if you guys have any questions or any feedback. My email's up here too, so if you'd like to get in touch, if you'd like to give me some more feedback or get more involved with the project, I always love hearing from teachers across the country, so welcome to hear how it works for your students or if you need any extra more support in your region.
That was excellent, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
So engaging, so many options. Yeah, so many options. I just love how it is, the engagement part is really, really great. And the critical thinking part too is really important for our kiddos. And so I thought that the everything about the resources and everything were very, very well thought through, and it'll make a lot of our discussions and lesson plans so much more engaging when it comes to that. Sometimes that's a hard one for some of us to get our head wrapped around of how to do it well. So thank you.
I get that a lot, especially around economics. So thank you, Shelley. We tried to keep it engaging, interesting, but also the amount of questions and follow-up conversations that come from these analyses and such are hopefully will work all right for you.
Yeah, I also like just the variety, right? Like you kind of had the little illustrations to begin with, and then it goes to the graphing, right? And the skills of graphing. And then, like you said, it's going to have an interactive map coming up. And so there you've got geography components as well. And so I think it's hitting a lot of the buttons that a lot of teachers have in their curriculum, because I know how difficult it must be to try and even consider doing a pan-Canadian activity. And so by hitting all of these different things, you can get those bits and pieces for every region in Canada. So that was really good.
And you also sorry, go for it.
Well, I was just gonna say, like for me, like in Manitoba, for example, we don't have like an economics curriculum, but a lot of the stuff you did with like supply and demand and sectors and levels of industry, that's all covered in our geography curriculum. So I like that teachers can kind of pick and choose to use some of the stuff that applies, and then if certain modules don't, then you don't have to use it all, right? It's easy just to access the stuff that applies to your curriculum. And it was really like the real life examples and stuff, and the interactive stuff would be fun for them. So I would definitely use that in my geography class.
Thanks, Garrett. And there's with some of the data too. So I didn't show you, but one of the budgeting lesson, we closed with a 5-question quiz that's online where it compares Stats Canada data to the questions they answer. So what province or territory you live, they're given population numbers, what field of work would you like to work at? And there's I think 8 or 10 of them listed, and it'll show percentage based on your province or region, but also all of Canada. And then the end one is how do Canadians spend their money? And you'll actually see the variance of province by province or territory and national level across those same categories, how Canadians spend their money. So there's ways you can regionalize it as much as you like. We just, of course, are trying to reach all Canadians. So it isn't always easy.
And then I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but Jackie had just said, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
She went through it this afternoon, and there's just so many options, and all of the interaction is just really effective. So I'm so glad that you were willing to take the time to share with us so that we can then pass this along to our fellow teachers and just be like, you got to check out these resources. So it's fantastic.
Awesome.
Thanks, Stephen, real quick, if I can keep you for just a second, the Bank of Canada Museum has actually been so generous to actually send us a few little prizes. So if in the chat, if you are willing to send me an email so I can email you directly and get your address, we'll send you a little prize from the Bank of Canada Museum. Otherwise, I think for everybody else, thank you so much for coming, for taking some time. And have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.